Most gardens end up looking like everyone else's garden because most gardeners are working from the same short list of plants, the same annuals from the same big box shelf, the same 3 shrubs every landscaper defaults to. Today, I'm giving you 10 plants that almost never make that list, and every single one earns its place for a real reason. Some feed pollinators when almost nothing else is blooming. Some give you fragrance you can smell from across the yard. Some are evergreen structure that looks good in January as well as July. A few are so low maintenance you'll wonder why garden centers don't push them harder. This isn't a random top 10. It's a working list, chosen so that by the time we're through, you'll have color, scent, wildlife value, and year-round structure covered. Tell me your USDA zone in the comments before we start, because a couple of these shift significantly depending on where you garden, and I read every comment. Let's get into the list. Plant 1, Daylily. Daylilies are the plant that quietly does more work for less effort than almost anything else you can put in the ground, and most gardeners still underuse them. Each individual bloom lasts a single day, but a mature clump sends up new flowers continuously for 4 to 6 weeks, and reblooming cultivars like Stella d'Oro will push out a second flush later in the season if you keep up with basic care. They're hardy across an enormous range, from USDA zones 3 through 9, and once established they tolerate drought, poor soil, and neglect better than almost any other flowering perennial you'll plant this year. The care routine is almost embarrassingly simple. Deadheading spent blooms won't give you more flowers, since bud count is set earlier in the season by genetics and growing conditions, but it keeps the plant looking tidy and stops energy going into seed production. Cut back the whole plant once a year, either in fall after foliage yellows or in early spring before new growth emerges. Never both. The real key to daylily performance is dividing overcrowded clumps. When a stand stops flowering as heavily as it used to, that's your sign the clump has become too dense to support strong bloom, and the right time to divide is right after flowering finishes, giving new divisions the rest of the season to establish roots before winter. Full sun gives you the strongest bloom, though daylilies will tolerate light afternoon shade in hotter zones. Plant them along a border, mass them on a slope where little else will grow, or use them to fill the gap left by spring bulbs as those go dormant. Few plants give you this much color for this little ongoing effort. Plant 2, Camellia. If your garden goes flat and lifeless every winter, camellias are the fix almost nobody plants. These evergreen shrubs hold glossy, dark green foliage year-round, and then, depending on variety, bloom anywhere from late fall through early spring, filling a season when almost nothing else in the garden is doing anything at all. They're reliable in USDA zones 7 through 10, though some Sasanqua varieties push into zone 6 with the right siting. The single most important thing to get right with camellias is soil. They need acidic, well-drained soil in the 5.5 to 6.5 pH range, and they genuinely hate wet feet, so if you've got a spot that stays soggy after rain, look elsewhere in the yard. Plant them slightly high, with an inch or 2 of the root ball above grade, and mulch lightly rather than heavily, since piling mulch against camellias increases disease risk instead of helping them. Give them dappled or partial shade rather than harsh afternoon sun, particularly in hotter zones, and protect flower buds from harsh winter wind. Here's the timing mistake that costs people a full season of bloom. Camellias set next year's flower buds by midsummer, so the only safe pruning window is immediately after they finish flowering, never in summer or fall. Keep any pruning light, removing at most a third of the plant in a season, and fertilize only once, right as new growth starts in late winter or early spring. A well-sited camellia will reward you with decades of winter color, planted once and largely left alone. Plant 3, Holly. Holly gets stereotyped as a stiff, prickly hedge plant, but the genus Ilex includes hundreds of species, from full-size trees down to compact mounding shrubs, in forms with smooth leaves as well as spiny ones, and berry colors running from the classic red through orange, yellow, and black. What every holly shares is toughness. Dense evergreen structure, genuine cold hardiness depending on species, from Zone 3 for the hardiest types down through Zone 9, and a shrub that once established asks almost nothing of you. The detail most gardeners miss is that hollies are dioecious, meaning individual plants are either male or female, and only females produce the berries everyone plants holly for. You need at least one male within pollinating distance, or you'll get a perfectly healthy shrub that never berries. Pruning needs vary by species. Japanese and Japan holly tolerate heavy shearing and rejuvenation pruning, where you can cut back up to a third of older branches at ground level to reinvigorate an overgrown shrub. English and blue holly need only light shaping and thinning of crossing branches. Across nearly all types, the safest pruning window is late winter before new growth starts, since evergreen hollies bloom and set berries on old wood, and cutting in the wrong season removes the very growth that would have produced this year's berries. Beyond that, water regularly through the first year to establish roots, mulch 3 to 4 inches deep while keeping it off the trunk, and expect an evergreen backbone plant that will outlive most other things in your landscape. Plant 4. Ruellia humilis. Ruellia humilis, commonly called wild petunia, is one of the best low-growing native perennials most American gardeners have simply never been introduced to. Despite the common name, it isn't related to the petunias sold at garden centers. It's a North American prairie native in the Acanthaceae family, hardy from USDA zones 4 through 8, and it produces trumpet-shaped, lavender to purple blooms from late spring all the way into fall. Individual flowers last only a day, but the plant produces them continuously, so there's color in that spot for months without any deadheading required. This is a plant built for the parts of your yard where other perennials struggle. It thrives in average to dry, well-drained soil and handles full sun to partial shade equally well, staying under 2 feet tall and spreading into a low, mounding clump that works beautifully at the front of a border or tucked into a rock garden. Once established, it's genuinely drought-tolerant and largely ignored by deer and rabbits, which alone makes it worth a spot in a garden that's been getting chewed. It self-seeds readily, which some gardeners consider a bonus and others manage by deadheading spent flowers before seed pods mature, since the ripened seed pods actually burst and can fling seeds several feet from the parent plant. Beyond the flowers themselves, wild petunia is a host plant for the common buckeye butterfly, meaning it's not just feeding adult pollinators with nectar, it's supporting the next generation of butterflies directly on its leaves. For a native plant garden or a meadow-style planting, few perennials give you this much bloom time for this little maintenance. Plant 5. Sanguisorba officinalis. Sanguisorba officinalis, Great Burnet, is the plant that naturalistic and prairie-style garden designers have been quietly obsessed with for the past decade, and it's still barely known outside that circle. It's a clump-forming, rhizomatous perennial that sends up wiry, branching stems topped with small, dark burgundy to deep red bottlebrush flowers from midsummer through fall, right as many other perennials are winding down. Hardy in USDA zones 3 through 8, it typically reaches 2 to 4 feet tall. Give it moderately fertile, moisture-retentive soil in full sun to partial shade, and in hotter climates, plan on some afternoon shade so it doesn't dry out and stress. It's genuinely low maintenance once established, tolerating short dry spells, though taller stems can flop and may need discreet staking or the support of nearby perennials and grasses to stay upright, which is exactly why designers weave it through ornamental grasses and other airy perennials rather than planting it alone. Deadhead spent flower spikes if you want to prevent the enthusiastic self-seeding this plant is known for. Left alone, it will happily colonize a bed over a few seasons. Beyond the ornamental value, the young leaves have a mild cucumber flavor and can be added to salads, and the plant has a long history in traditional herbal use for its astringent properties. In the garden, its wiry texture and late-season color make it one of the best partners for anything that needs a plant to weave through and soften, rather than a plant that wants to stand alone. Plant 6. Rosemary. Rosemary earns its spot on nearly every serious gardener's list because it does 3 jobs at once: culinary herb, fragrant evergreen structure, and one of the most reliable early pollinator plants you can grow. In mild winter climates, USDA zones 8 through 10, it grows into a genuine woody shrub, sometimes reaching 4 feet or more, and stays evergreen and usable year-round. In colder zones, it's typically grown as an annual or brought indoors, though hardier cultivars like ARP and Hill Hardy push cold tolerance down into Zone 6 with the right siting. Rosemary asks for exactly the opposite of what most garden plants want: lean, sharply drained soil and minimal fertility. Rich soil and regular feeding produce soft, floppy growth with weaker flavor and lower cold hardiness, so resist the urge to pamper it. Full sun is essential, 6 or more hours a day. Keeps growth dense rather than leggy. Water deeply but infrequently, letting the soil dry out between waterings, since rosemary's biggest killer by far is not cold or heat but soggy roots. For pruning, harvest regularly, since regular cutting is essentially free maintenance pruning that keeps the plant bushy rather than woody and bare at the base. Avoid cutting into old, hardened brown wood, which rosemary regenerates from poorly, and instead always cut back into green growth. If you live somewhere rosemary can overwinter outdoors, you'll also notice it's one of the very first plants blooming for bees in late winter and early spring, making it as valuable to your garden's ecosystem as it is to your kitchen. Plant 7. Jasmine. Few plants deliver fragrance the way jasmine does, and that's really the entire case for growing it. A single established vine near a porch, window, or seating area can perfume an entire section of yard, particularly star jasmine and common jasmine, the 2 types most widely available. Hardiness varies significantly by species. Star jasmine reliably in USDA zones 8 through 11 and struggling outside that range, while more cold-tolerant relatives can be found for zones 7 and even 6 with the right variety and siting. Jasmine wants full sun for the heaviest bloom, though it tolerates partial shade with somewhat reduced flowering, and it needs well-draining, slightly acidic soil kept consistently moist through the growing season without ever staying waterlogged. This is a twining vine, not a self-clinging one, so it needs a trellis, arbor, fence, or similar structure from the start, and training it while it's young is far easier than fighting an established, tangled mass later. Prune right after the main flush of flowering finishes, removing dead wood and cutting back to maintain the shape and size you want. Pruning too late in the season risks removing the wood that would have carried next year's blooms. In colder zones where jasmine can't survive outdoors, it makes an excellent container plant that can be moved to a sheltered spot or indoors for winter. And even in a pot near a door, the fragrance alone justifies the extra care. Plant 8. Knautia. Knautia macedonica, sometimes called Macedonian scabious or pincushion flower, is one of the best perennials you're probably not growing yet, and it deserves far more attention than it gets. Deep crimson to burgundy pincushion-shaped flowers, about 1.5 inches across, bloom on wiry, branching stems from early summer straight through to frost, held well above the foliage where they move in every breath of wind. Hardy across USDA zones 4 through 9, it's exceptionally cold-tolerant and, once established, genuinely drought-resistant. This plant evolved on nutrient-poor, rocky limestone slopes in the Balkans, and that history explains almost everything about how to grow it well. It wants full sun and lean, sharply drained soil, and it actively performs worse in rich, heavily fertilized ground, where excess nitrogen produces floppy, weak-stemmed growth at the expense of flowers. Skip the fertilizer entirely once established. Deadheading spent blooms extends the flowering season significantly and is really the only regular maintenance this plant asks for. It's a relatively short-lived perennial, typically persisting 2 to 5 years, but it self-seeds reliably enough that a planting tends to renew itself indefinitely without ever needing to be replaced by hand. The flower shape makes it one of the best landing platforms in the garden for bees, butterflies, and hoverflies. And because it blooms continuously across the entire summer rather than in one short flush, it's providing nectar during exactly the stretch when many spring perennials have already finished. Plant 9. Lavender. Lavender combines fragrance, pollinator value, and drought tolerance better than almost any other plant you can grow, which is exactly why it shows up in nearly every low-water, full-sun garden design. English lavender is the hardiest type, reliable through USDA zones 5 to 9, while French and Spanish lavenders are more tender and better suited to zones 8 through 10 or grown as annuals farther north. The single most important thing to understand about lavender is drainage. It will tolerate poor, lean soil without complaint, but it will not tolerate wet feet, and more lavender plants are lost to soggy winter soil than to cold. If your soil holds water, plant on a slope, in a raised bed, or amend heavily with grit before you put lavender in the ground. Full sun, at least 6 hours a day, is non-negotiable for compact, floriferous growth. Prune every year after the main flowering flush, shearing off spent flower stalks along with an inch or two of the green growth beneath them, and shape the plant into a rounded dome as you cut, since that shape sheds winter rain and snow and keeps the woody center from splitting open under the weight. The one cut you never make is into the bare, leafless wood below the green growth. Lavender doesn't reliably resprout from old wood, and a cut that deep can kill the plant outright rather than simply setting it back. Water deeply but infrequently while it's establishing, then largely stop once it's mature, since lavender genuinely performs best when it's left a little thirsty. Plant 10. Agastache. Agastache, commonly called anise hyssop or hummingbird mint, might be the single best pollinator plant on this entire list, and it's remarkable how rarely it shows up in home gardens compared to how often it appears in professional pollinator plantings. Spikes of tubular purple, blue, or coral flowers, depending on variety, bloom from midsummer into fall, and the crushed foliage releases a sweet, licorice-like scent that's part of why it's such a popular culinary and tea herb alongside its ornamental value. Native species are hardy from USDA zones 4 through 9, thriving in heat and tolerating drought and poor soil once established. Site Agastache in full sun with sharply drained soil. This is a plant that struggles far more with wet winter soil than with heat or drought, so avoid low spots where water collects. Water regularly through the first season while roots establish, then cut back significantly once the plant is mature, since lean conditions produce sturdier, more compact growth than rich, heavily watered soil does. Deadheading extends bloom and keeps the plant tidier, though many gardeners leave some spent flower spikes standing through fall and winter, since the seed heads feed goldfinches and other birds well into the colder months. The real reason to grow this plant is what it brings into the garden. Agastache is one of the most reliable draws for bumblebees, native bees, butterflies, and hummingbirds you can plant, with nectar so abundant that large plantings have historically been used to support honeybee colonies directly. Pair it with coneflower, black-eyed Susan, or ornamental grasses for a late summer planting that stays in near constant motion with pollinator activity. 10 plants, and notice what they actually give you together. Winter structure from Camellia and Holly, fragrance from rosemary, jasmine, and lavender, months of non-stop color from daylily, Knautia, and wild petunia, and some of the best pollinator support available from Agastache and Great Burnet. That's a garden working on every level at once, not just filling space. Tell me in the comments which of these 10 you're adding first, and subscribe if you want the next list before the season turns again.